Today we are told to be fruitful and multiply, though not necessarily like that. Welcome to Daily Gospel Reflections. I'm Dr. Ben Safransky. On a side note, today is the feast of one of my very favorite saints. Now during Lent, we don't technically celebrate what are called optional memorials, kind of minor saint feast days. But I just wanted to mention today is one of my favorites, one of the greatest fathers of the church, St. Cyril of Jerusalem, who lived in the 4th and early 5th century. He was very famous for preaching to those who were preparing to come into the church to receive baptism, confirmation, Eucharist. And some of his really stirring homilies are still available to us and available in English. So if you're interested in reading one, I'll put a link with this video. And when I read today's passage, all I can think is that this God, the God who is portrayed as the owner of the vineyard, is the God that we want and need. Because not only does he understand that we need multiple chances if we're going to come around, if we're going to improve, if we're going to do well with what he has given us, he knows that we need mercy, that we need to be forgiven. Think about in this passage how many times the vineyard owner gives the tenants additional chances, even though they haven't asked for forgiveness. He keeps giving them chances. That's mercy. Saint Faustina Kowalska, a Polish nun, received the image of the divine mercy from God in the 1930s. This is a famous image you've probably seen of Jesus with his hands extended. At the bottom it says, "Jesus, I trust in you." And there's a ray of light coming out of each hand. One is blue, white, and one is red. She wrote that mercy was God's chief attribute. And I think this passage shows how true that is. Now, I've learned a lot about this from being a parent. If you're a parent, you know that helping a little person thrive and grow means that you have to be merciful and understanding, means that you can't bring down the hammer the very first time they make a mistake, especially the younger they are. However, this passage also shows us that ultimately we can't be complacent in the chances that God keeps giving us, and that there are consequences if we keep rejecting God's offers of mercy. God wants fruit from us. We can't just sit back and say, "Oh, I'm baptized," or "I'm Catholic, that makes me good," right? I can't sit back and say, "Oh, I'm this or that, I'm good enough," right? This passage tells us that if we do not continue to produce the fruits of charity, mercy, kindness, self-control, that we will ultimately be thrown out of the vineyard and will have no inheritance with God. Now, think about a tree. To produce fruit, a tree first has to be nourished, fed, and watered, right? A tree that is sick in itself, that is dry, is not going to produce good fruit. So my challenge to you today is that if you feel like you're having trouble producing fruit like you would want to produce, like you know God wants from you, and try to think about whether you are getting enough spiritual nourishment to keep your tree fed, watered, flourishing, so that it can produce fruit. And if you don't think you are, then I would challenge you to renew your dedication to prayer and the Eucharist. Right now during Lent is as good a time as any to renew your dedication to those things, because those things will feed your tree, and then you can produce much better fruit. God bless you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.